we've spoken around what we can do or have been able to do for a number of years, actually. Sometimes when people talk about AI being new, and then I sit there thinking, but we've been refining it for the last 12 years. I mean, I can remember
neural networks and stuff have
Yeah.
been around for donkeys years.
ages.
Long before.
I know we were looking at, how can we correlate change back to that example? And I remember sat down on that project. It was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Trying to work out how we could start to use those metrics and start to use things like k-means clustering, or those old, not old, but those historical ways of where AI came from. But it's been around for a long time. I just think why it's got so much in the public consciousness now is I think about what we could do 12 years ago and what we could do now has really shifted.
Yeah.
And also people's understanding of it has changed, as well as good and bad press, bringing it into the public's consciousness, and therefore into the consciousness of IT much more readily. But it's in terms of that was machine learning, and now we're in the generative AI stage.
Yeah.
Where do you think we can leverage that generative AI now to help customers do even more than we've already spoke about in the machine learning context?
Yeah, there's so many routes now, and to your point, the technology is so much more accessible because k-means and machine learning and all the sort of the big data innovations we've seen over the last 10 years really were locked away with the rocket scientists and those like you and I that had a bit of time on our hands and wanted to play and enthuse about some of this technology. But Gen AI now is very available to everyone. I would advise, in about 5-10 years' time, it's probably going to be as common as doing a pivot table in Excel. Everyone's going to be able to do it. It's part of the job. You won't even have to be able to put it on your CV because it's going to be that simple. If you want to invest in anything as a technology person today, prompt engineering is get ahead of that one, is one of the areas that I'm definitely doing a lot of research and looking into. But in terms of the way that I'm seeing people in the operations space using it, it's a number of steps, really. So the first one is summation.
Okay.
Like PagerDuty, we're known traditionally for on-call and changeovers in rotas. So if you're running a long-running incident and you need to, we do incident commander training a lot. If you're going to change over your incident commander, you've been running for 6 hours, we actually advise 2 hours for an incident commander to run a SEV0, P0, P1. You should be changing over ideally every hour, every 2 hours. That's quite a frequent amount of changes if it goes on for quite some time. So how do you get that person coming in up to speed? You can do the old-fashioned way, which is the human being attempts to think about all the things that have happened over the last 2 hours and tries to do a download. Or it's just catch me up. All the data that's been inputted either on a transcript on a Zoom call or on other call mediums are available, or in chat ops. So obviously, like PagerDuty, we have an unparalleled uptime, but things do occur. So, of course, we have everything transcribed into our chat ops tool so that when you come in, you just type in PagerDuty, catch me up. Boom, there it is. And it's not a human being trying to summarize it. It's Gen AI. It's really accurate. It's taken off the data that we're feeding into it. So whether it's an incident commander or a subject matter expert that's doing a changeover that's joining, or if it's an executive that needs to relay some information, or an account rep that's looking after some of your key customers that needs to give your customers an update. We use it for catch up. We use it for status updates now as well.
Okay.
Do I share this story? Yeah, it's always good fun. I had an organization that was using PagerDuty in pockets. And I mentioned earlier about front end was nice, clean data, and it was great new technology, and back end was legacy technology. That day or that week, we just onboarded some of their senior stakeholders into the system. Nobody told the individuals on the front line. So they're sending out status updates like the Muppets have mucked it up again. And that went to the main CIOs across the organization, which in the future, things like Gen AI could write a slightly more professional status update voice on two things. A, the information communicated to stakeholders is accurate and professional. And B, why on earth were developers in the first place context switching away from things they should have been working on to then just doing really mundane updates?
Yeah.
You know, that what's going on, who's been affected, all that stuff can be fully automated as long as you've got the right data that's being fed in, as long as you've got the right prompts around it as well, so you're not getting complete hallucinations, which again is another thing that's coming into Gen AI. So that's 101 simple steps. The 201 I mentioned earlier, actually, the Zen 10 down to Zen 0. We go and run unobtrusive automated diagnostics, and it's typically the same scripts that individuals could do, or there may be variations upon a theme, and that's where Gen AI is great for that. So you can do really good variations on a theme without doing anything destructive whatsoever. Pick up scripts, a number of built into our core automation products, we've got the capabilities to do that now.
Okay.
And we've been using them live beautifully for about the last 18 months across a lot of our platforms to do diagnostics as well. And then that's before we start to get into the really exciting world of automated remediation, which is actually more intrusive scripts.
It is.
I've had a lot of people saying, no, I am not ready for that yet. I am not ready to write something or have Gen AI create something ground up that will do a restart or a simple, just reach into a database and remove some locks or deletion of logs or something slightly more intrusive. But I think it's coming back to that autonomous or zero-touch operations.
Yep.
It's not far off.
No, I completely agree. And that's the bit that's really exciting. And
yeah,
I think sometimes when we talk about Gen AI and people get a little bit nervous around that, but in essence, a lot of what we could do with it is sort of what you would probably do with a script anyway. You know, at the moment, most organizations, back to your point about the nervousness, if you probably broke down what they do, it goes to someone in operations, they look at probably a predefined knowledge article, run this. The chances of that person completely understanding any downstream negative impact of that is probably quite small today. And they're still going to hit the button to run that because it's 2 in the morning.
Going to do it. Yep.
So in some ways, having Gen AI do it is less scary because it will be doing it based on a set of metrics that it can change and flex. So there's one area where actually there's an advantage of doing it. But also it's about once you get over that initial boundary of letting it do it, you can then see the benefit of it calling that automation or making some variance in terms of what it's doing. Yeah. And I think the other great thing is even if you don't use it right now to run a fix or to try to resolve something itself, even if you use it to generate synthetic transactions to understand what's happening and where in the chain it's breaking,
stuff,
because it's great at doing that, and it can go and run that. You know, it's not going to cause any issue, but the time it saves back to that point, back to actually that Zen 10, Zen 0 thing. If Gen AI is going to do that synthetic transactions for you, running all those tests for you, understanding where in the chain it's broken, then when it does come through to the SME, they've already got back to that point all of that knowledge. They can see, so Gen AI's run all of this, it's got back all of this feedback. Okay, it's that point in the chain that we've got the problem. You know, it knows straight away. And synthetic transactions have been around for a long time, but I see that as this is a great technology to build that up really quickly, because historically, to build a script to do something synthetically took a long time. And there was always an argument, which was, okay, so how much benefit are we going to get out of that versus just, well, let's just, when it breaks, we'll go and fix it.
We'll go and have a look. Yeah, we can rush rather than wait for
exactly.
synthetic.
But now you haven't got that time to create it. Just let Gen AI do it, let it go. And it also gives you that confidence then that if it's understanding the right synthetic thing to do, well, then let it go and fix it. But you're getting that baseline that says, we know it's working. We know it's understood the problem. So therefore, let it move on.
And you're right, with all the amount of, you can put guardrails in with Gen AI. I think that's the challenge at the moment. Some of us are playing with it and we're leaving everything wide open. Gen AI, try and do this better. It's great. As I say, I've looked quite a lot into prompt engineering of late as well. And as long as you provide it decent guardrails and then deal with all the subsequent follow-ups as well, but put that in place, then it's a really effective way. And it won't go too far off the tried and tested path.
And in terms of what you're seeing, customers using sort of PagerDuty's capability to automate from the point of which it sees the event and it's correlated through to the point of generating resolutions. Are you starting to see a shift now in customers using that part of the technology much more than they would have done, say, 6 months to a year ago?
Definitely now. Organizations are experimenting with it. And again, sometimes it's just due to volumes of telemetry. I hosted a panel on AI ops and automation of recently, and one of the fascinating stories was how they were using AI and Gen AI to deal with, this was a water company that was dealing with telemetries for leakages and those sorts of things as well. So dealing with those volumes of data, in fact, this scenario was actually getting field teams out before something springs a leak. You can't deal with those volumes of data without using AI and also kind of the Gen AI approaches as well.
Yep.
What we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing quite a fair amount of remediation in those companies with a lot of agility.
Yeah.
Not as much in the enterprise space at the moment, but enterprises are definitely dabbling with the summation use cases, the diagnostics use cases, and the one I didn't mention earlier was the learning. So once you're outside of speed is critical, because that's the other thing about the life I deal with of incidents. Every second counts.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I feel a lot of organizations aren't necessarily brave enough to take the training wheels off to do the remediation stuff, but they'll do everything else.
Yeah.
But the one thing Gen AI can, again, really speed up cost and toil is that subsequent learning.
Yeah.
Where's the area for improvements that we can then feed in and just make our organization run a lot better? So feeding all that data into there is great, really. And
well, those post-implementation reviews, right? So that those documentations or RCAs that you have to do, nobody likes to do those, right? Because it's like, well, the problem's fixed now. I don't really want to go back over it. But yeah, Gen AI can generate that type of documentation.
Yeah.
And that's something that, we don't like doing. So
we don't.
Exactly. So let Gen AI do that, and then that still gives you that knowledge across the organization. You can get all that data. Oh, okay, so I can see what caused it. This is what happened. This is when it happened. Great. So how do we now go about making sure it doesn't occur again? So that type of information for the problem management team, for your development team, and for your managing change going forward is so critical. And at the moment, it's typically done quite poorly. Because it's like
100%.
We're just back onto our day jobs again now. Oh, there's another instance coming. I haven't got time to go and review that. And a lot of organisations might not have a dedicated problem team that could spend that time going through it. Whereas, as we all know, the best incident or the best way to stop incidents is they don't happen at all, right? So your problem function is so critical to getting rid of that. And I think Gen AI and AI generally can have a massive impact in terms of being able to understand what did happen and then allowing you to quickly put something in place to stop it happening again.
100%. And actually, I love the way you mentioned documentation. I'm going to do a plug for one of my colleagues. Justin has just released an article on using Gen AI for automation and documentation around it. So one of the things that's typically poorly done, people will put scripts and automation together. Goodness knows what this thing does, what it's designed for as well. So he's written something that basically will allow, and we published it on our open source automation as well, where you just run it across thousands and thousands of jobs and you get crystal clear documentation as to what the job does, why it does it, and every other bit of detail as well in there as well.
It's a perfect use case, isn't
it? Tedious as anything.
Exactly.
Why are we making human beings do this? It could just be eradicated overnight.
Exactly. And then you have that, by generating that knowledge and that documentation, you can then empower your operations team or your service desk team to do a lot more because the quality of the documentation is much greater.
Yeah.
And therefore that concept of shift left, whether you like that term or not. But that
I prefer the augmented engineer was one of those ones. We're raising what we're doing rather than necessarily shifting or lowering.
Yeah.
We're making ourselves better.
It allows you to do that much more quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just taking away that low-hanging fruit. As you said, the toil that people don't like to do. Well, let's just get something else to do. I mean, I use it all the time because I don't really like doing documentation. It's not fun. I would rather be learning something new or doing something that's much more exciting. And actually, that's what I should be doing. Right? That's where, people can add value to organizations. That's where, I think it was a quote actually at the PagerDuty event where somebody said about, are you worried about how AI is going to, replace jobs or take things away? And I think the answer to it was, well, I don't see that. You need to understand it, but if you understand AI, then you can work with it, and that's what we should be using it for. So you're using it to help your day. It's not going to replace people, but it should allow us to work in a better way and in a more efficient way. And actually, if you use it in the right way, it can make your job much more enjoyable. I think of the times where I'm using it, it's mostly to take away the stuff I don't like doing. And there's so much opportunity to do that now. And then it allows me to concentrate on the things that I do like doing, which is, designing new architecture, coming up with new ideas, coming up with ways of solving problems. And then I can let the machine behind me make sure that everything I've done historically is documented and it's up to date. And back to that, hitting that regulatory standpoint, if I can use it to do some of the regulatory stuff, brilliant, right? It gives me one less thing to do.
Feels like all the Friday jobs. We're all guilty of it. We've all got the list of nonsense. We'll just do it on Friday. So yeah, if we could just do these little bits using Gen AI through the day, that's just great. I'd love, on a complete tangent, I'd love to see across organisations who's actually using it. What are I bet there's a myriad of amazing use cases that's just springing up through, as I say, non-IT individuals that have just got ChatGPT and mucking around with it.
I think there's a lot of that, and I think again back to say you can put guardrails around it, so you can sort of let some of that innovation come forward without it necessarily causing an issue within organisation with the company, and also I think organisations now need to be thinking about how they're going to govern it and how they're going to control it, but still allow it. I think sometimes we're quite guilty in the IT industry of bringing in governance too late and probably therefore becomes quite heavy-handed. Whereas I think if you get on top of that change now and you start to say, okay, so where are we going to use it? Where is it going to add value? What is acceptable? And you push that out immediately, you almost still allow that organic innovation to happen, but you've got enough control around that. So when it does grow, people are already aware where they should and shouldn't be using it and where it makes sense for that organization. So I think customers need to be starting to, rather than try to ignore it and say, well, we know it's coming, but it's not quite, get on top of it now, because it will come. It is coming. Yeah. And therefore you already have the right framework for it, and therefore you could just leverage what it's good at.
100%. And it's great. I think it's a brilliant disruptor for the IT industry. And you and I can have maybe a call or a conversation outside of this about its impact on the music industry and more creative mediums as well, which is a conversation we'll probably avoid for now. Yeah. But that's the area of concern I think most people have got. Yeah,
no, I agree. And bringing that all together, so 100%. Obviously today was about zero-touch ops, and so we've sort of spoken about how you can get there using an element of machine learning, an element of event correlation, moving into Gen AI.
Yeah.
But ultimately, where are you seeing customers using zero-touch ops now and today?
Automation is key. So I'm going to say automation is definitely not a new concept. It's been around since the first industrial age, but we've seen an acceleration of IT automation, and you can't do that without ensuring that automation is fed meaningful signals, data that makes sense, data that's data that you know about, data that's predictable, or in some cases data that's unpredictable, but you're able to respond to it in a meaningful and sensible fashion. So that's where we're seeing it, that combination of AI, automation, overlaid with one area we haven't really covered upon is the amount of stats that you get from different people about the percentage of things that are found by a human being rather than telemetry or observability or those sorts of things. So how do we make sure we're bringing that data in, the human element of data, our customers' data, combining that, and then automation wherever we can to reduce that toil.
And I think I was talking to customers recently, and one of the things they'll often talk about is that, is zero touch operations genuinely possible, right? Because there's always some skepticism around that.
Go to San Francisco, you see the Waymos driving up and down the streets. Some of my colleagues have had some terrifying experiences in them, and some are saying they're amazing. But if they can do it.
Yeah, and I'm of the similar mindset. I mean, I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
It's coming, and we get to this point of self-learning, which has been around for a long time. Like, can we get to that stage? Can we get beyond the sort of reactive, proactive
It's got to be
into
done.
the point of self-learning? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I think we can.
What human being today, and I'm sure there are many that like this as a role, but we quite often use the term keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Who wants the job of basically keeping the lights on versus the job of innovating, of creating more, about helping your organization move forward, about helping your money, as I say, your organization increase revenue, reduce costs, or reduce risk. That's going to be the focus, not just keep the lights on.
No, I think I completely agree. And I think that's the whole point of zero touch ops, right? That's what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to make happen for your
KTLA
organization.
just needs to be, we've got it up and running. I worked with a large IoT company as well. And one of the interesting things, when they first started doing a lot of IoT devices, you'd buy the device, and then that'd be it. That was the only cost that you had to lay out. Now, of course, in this day and age, we're used to subscriptions.
Yep.
But back when they launched these, they didn't have a subscription. So the revenue was taken and gone. So how long do they keep this? In this case, it was webcams, dehumidifiers that were plugged in as well. How long do you guarantee that thing is going to work on the internet for? You don't want to have a human being 5 years later worrying about whether I'll go into a little bit of personal detail, my webcam on my fish is still working or not. Yes, I am sad enough, and I bought that webcam about 5 years ago, and I expect it to work for another 5 years. But there is an organisation that's running the infrastructure to make sure I get to see that information on my phone. Far too much detail there, Aaron. So that's how I see zero touch.
Relax remotely and watch your fish from anywhere.
Absolutely.
It's an important use of technology.
100%. Well, I'd be gutted if it didn't work. But there is an organisation that's keeping that running for me. And I hope and I pray that there's not a human being that's involved in that. It needs to be zero touch. 100% zero touch.
Completely agree. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Tim.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having us here,
I think
Aaron.
it's been a good conversation. And hopefully for the people that are watching and listening, they've learned something about zero touch operations and where we think it's going and what we think we can do right now for customers, which I think is the most important aspect. So much of what we've said today is things we can do now. And when people talk about where's it going, and I think there's always quite a lot of debate about, well, where are we going next and what can we do tomorrow? But in actual fact, we can do so much right now that a lot of customers aren't doing yet, aren't quite there yet. So I think we've got a huge amount of things we can already grow into the technology that's available now, rather than having to always focus on what's next, what's tomorrow. I think it's about getting on boarding with what we can do now, getting customers to move forward, getting that leverage across organizations, making those cultural changes that you alluded to earlier on within those organizations to allow that to happen is what we can do.
It's brilliant. Just needs a little bit of courage to move forward, to take that first step.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully you found something interesting in here. And as always, you can contact us at hello@ktsl.com. And thanks again to Tim from PagerDuty for his time.
Oh, thank you.